Hello my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to our /ProRevenge, where people get back at others who've wronged them to the point where lives are destroyed. And in today's episode, workers are fighting back against their bosses, guys, and one OP tells a story about the time this boss fires them for following orders and regrets it big time. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the stories. And as a reminder, this voice should only be on the DarkFluff YouTube channel, nowhere else. Let's dive in. So this didn't happen to me, but to a friend of mine who worked in a different department than me. They didn't want to post it, so I'm sharing it for them. Now to the story. It's a bit longer, so bear with me. This new supervisor came into the department, and he was one of those bosses who wanted to make a bunch of unnecessary changes and implement a host of tedious rules. He would write people up for being a minute late, for performing the job in a way he didn't like. You get the idea. Anyways, the department he came into was staffed by very senior members who had been there so long that they were making more money than him per hour. Our company has a union they're all a part of. They've been through their fair share of crappy supervisors, and they just kept their heads down and did the work since none of them could afford to leave. Since these guys have been there so long, they immediately noticed when their pay stubs were smaller than before. The supervisor was paying them for an hour less than what they actually worked every single day they worked. So when the paychecks came and they were a few $100s short, of course they were gonna notice. I seriously have no idea how this supervisor thought he could get away with it. These guys, having worked together for so long, immediately come up with a plan. They decide to keep quiet about it. They let him continue shorting them until the moment was right, as they knew the company would be forced to pay them the missing time, and most of it was overtime too, as well as a settlement to keep it out of court if they played their cards right. So with that, they waited. They kept putting up with his crappy rules and attitude, and they said nothing. They knew the supervisor was trying to get promoted, which was why he was moved to their department in the first place. By not clocking their overtime hours, he made himself look more productive with fewer hours needed. Of course, this made him look like a better candidate. He kept up the annoying rules and the stupid attitude the whole time, which only made this revenge even sweeter. Everyone in the company knew he wanted the promotion that was coming up, and the guy wouldn't shut up about it in the break room, the office, everywhere. He told anyone who looked remotely alive how he knew he was gonna get it. Well, 7 months went by and the supervisor gets promoted, just like he said. And that's the moment they all chose to come forward. And it could not have played more perfectly in their favor. You see, our company uses a time clock system, and every employee has a badge they use to clock in. The supervisor finalizes the time cards in the computer, and absolutely everything is tracked. Essentially, this supervisor was deleting their punch-in and starting them up an hour later every day for 7 months. Now, with our system, you can't just delete punches. You have to add comments because, like I said, everything is tracked. So this supervisor would just put in BS notes, just some gibberish to get it through. Also, every department supervisor has to keep track of a physical binder that records what startup time for that night was supposed to be. So if there was any issue, they can reference the book. So when these guys came forward, it took less than 10 minutes of digging to pull up everything, and to see how badly this guy had messed up. There was screaming, crying, and a lot of apologies from the supervisor, but the damage was done. The supervisor was immediately fired, and all the people he screwed over are getting back pay, plus overtime and a settlement. They didn't disclose how much, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was several $1,000s per person. Listen guys, I know what you're probably thinking. What a stupid supervisor to do something like that, especially when there's such a strong paper trail. Like, I just don't understand how he thought he would get away with it. Like, there was no way. I also don't know how the workers all agreed and went 7 months getting shortchanged, or in this case, getting short hundreds of dollars. Regardless though, kudos to them, and talk about playing the long game. And if you enjoyed that post where the workers got together to get rid of a nasty boss, you'll enjoy this next post as well. So my former boss was, simply put, an absolute effing a-hole. He was the type of person that had the ability to be so condescending while acting as if he was doing you a favor. His condescending attitude was sometimes downright abusive, and he seemed to have a particular problem with all the female employees. Not only that, the guy loves to scream at people regardless of how little their mistake was, if there even was one. He was basically a slave driver and expected everyone to sacrifice their own personal lives for their job. The thing that sparked this revenge, though, was him telling me to miss my older sister's birthday, to come into work on a day I booked off. I'm not lying when I say no one liked him. It actually got to the point where all 10 of us couldn't stand him being there anymore. So we did the protocol. All of us piled together evidence we had of him not sticking to booked off holiday schedules, having inappropriate and sometimes abusive language, and we compiled it all in one Google document. This was step number 1. Step number 2 was getting the cherry on top. We did this by getting him to do one of his screaming tantrums at one of us. We wanted this to be as damning as possible, and the youngest and smallest girl out of all of us volunteered to be the bait. She made an intentional dumb mistake in her paperwork, something bound to get her roared at, and the idiot actually took the bait. You see, this guy likes to do his scoldings in front of all of us to prove a point. He would often call us into a meeting room and yell at the person, rule by fear as he called it. This gave us the perfect opportunity to film it from behind our desks and add it to that document. Another thing, in our company, there is this really not well-made email system. You can send an email to an entire department, and I mean entire, as long as you have its name and manager's name. But the thing about this was the fact that all of this information was completely and freely given to employees. This means that a person could send whatever email they wanted to the entire company, including the CEO. So one morning at 10 a.m., to ensure that as many people would be working as possible, we made this burner email and we sent the Google document through an email to everyone in the company. It took a while as there were many departments to get through, but we got there in the end. We gave the email the subject, boss's name, vital information, branch name, department name. Of course, our boss receives the email as well, and you could basically hear the clutter from his office as people all over the company were contacting him to ask him what the heck was this about. HR did an investigation into him and they took heavy disciplinary action. As far as I know, he wasn't directly fired, but instead, he resigned. And a month after, we never saw him again, and he was replaced by a new guy who was also an a-hole, but just less of one. I'm a long-time lurker, and boy do I have a story. Here is some background. I've been working the retail business for over 20 years, and let me tell you, some of the managers they hire, I can do a better job. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Over the years of doing retail, I've established a reputation for myself. I'm called Mrs. Reliable. If you need someone to come in, they call me. If you need someone to stay late, they call me. If you need to switch with someone because management said no for your day off, they will call me. You can probably see where this story might be going, right? This story takes place a couple of years ago when I worked a major grocery store in my city as a cashier. I was just hired to be a cashier. I wasn't a manager, nor a supervisor, nor was I customer service. However, I was trained for nearly all the duties of someone who is. If you need change, I went to grab the change that you needed. If you needed an override, I did the override. If you needed something from behind the counter, I just need to know what it is you need and I went to grab it. I did all of this on top of my cashier duties and self-checkout duties. My manager at the time was Ashley. She was a really good boss and I liked working with her. Unfortunately, a year into me starting, she left. Enter the D-bag. Now, if you've ever wondered what happened to that spoiled brat in school whose mommy never said no and they always got what they wanted, that's basically this guy, all grown up in a manager's position. He was the type of manager that if he told you to do something, he expected you to do it immediately without question. If you have plans after work, this guy expected you to whip out your phone right there and then, cancel your plans, and come into work. If you have a doctor's appointment, no. The guy expected you to cancel that appointment and then come into work. And the thing is, if you told him no, the guy would say in the most condescending tone, "Are you the boss or am I the boss? I need you to do it anyway." And then he would just stand there scowling at you the whole time, basically trying to intimidate you by making you feel so uncomfortable by staring at you until you cave. Now, I've had my fair share of awful managers, and seriously, if I didn't need the money, I would have walked out right there and then and never returned. The guy was one of those managers where every single shift, I literally thought about walking out a dozen times and never coming back. The guy hated me as I have a naturally sassy, sarcastic personality. I'm blunt, have no filter, say what's on my mind, and I don't put up with people's BS. That all said, around this time, summer was ending, meaning we were in the now hiring stage and many positions were starting to open up in the store. Keep this in mind. Now, you might be asking, what did this guy do to me to get me to start my ProRevenge? Strike number 1. I had surgery done on one of my legs and I needed to take a few days off. Since I had some vacation time saved up, I used my hours for those days so I didn't have to worry so much about not getting paid. Well, this D-bag calls me a day before I was supposed to come in, asking if I could do a 9 to 1 shift. I asked him 3 times over the phone, who's closing? Because originally, I was supposed to close that day until I got approval for my days off. He never answered me, so I just figured they had it covered. I come in, and of course, halfway through my shift, this D-bag calls me over, and he says they don't have a closer, that I need to stay and do it. Keep in mind, I asked him 3 times on the phone who was closing. This guy wanted me to clock out, go home for a few hours, and then come back to work to close. I of course said no, and then he tries the whole guilt-tripping thing about not having anyone and that we really need you to do this. I again said no because 1, I'm really tired. I just came off of surgery like 3 days ago. 2, I already made plans with my husband for the evening. And then he tries the aggressive approach. He says to me, "I'm the boss. You will do what I say. I can fire you right now." I just stood my ground, and of course he didn't like this, because the next time I came to work, he was being petty and passive-aggressive with me. When I had my follow-up appointment with the doctor, he asked me if I could come in earlier. I told him, no, I can't because I have a doctor's appointment that morning. He then did the usual, "Well, I need you to do it anyways," and then started doing that stupid stare with me. Unfortunately for him, I don't take this crap. I quickly shut it down. When I came in after my appointment, the guy was standing there with a smug grin. He loudly says in earshot of the bigwigs from corporate visiting that day, "Well, OP, looks like you noticed that I didn't call you in because we didn't need you." I just replied, "Good, because I wasn't able to come in early anyway." And here's strike number 2. Remember how I said the store had openings? Well, it turns out that customer service needed some help, and the only way to get there was to ask your manager for a transfer. So I went to D-bag and I asked him about being at the customer service desk. With everything I've already been doing, I was basically the front-end assistant manager without the pay and title. He said he would get back to me and that he'd think about it. 2 to 3 weeks later, I start seeing people that I trained or people who have started after I did getting promoted to customer service, while I stayed as a cashier with all the other responsibilities piled on top. This customer service position would have easily gotten me a raise. The supervisor position would have gotten me a raise. I was starting to get the message of why pay for the cow when the milk is free. I was doing all of this extra work. Why would he promote me and have to pay me more? Strike number 3. I was starting to look for another job at this point because I was getting sick and tired of how I was being treated, but I wanted to try to give this guy one last chance. So I find out the seafood department in my store had an opening, and I even talked to the seafood department manager about me possibly being in this department. He was ecstatic to have me, and he was willing to work around my college schedule. I had to talk to my manager in order to get the transfer going. So I talked to him, and he starts coming up with all kinds of excuses to not have me transfer. Basically, letting me know that I'll stay as a cashier for as long as I work here, but he would think about it. 3 to 4 weeks pass, and I've been getting nowhere with this whole transferring to the other department. Even the seafood manager was wondering why it was taking so long and why was management dragging their feet with this. Turns out, the idiot blocked my transfer and they wound up hiring a new employee to the seafood department. When I found this out, I was livid. We had a big argument about it, and that's when D-Bag said the magic words. He says to me, just do your job, stop asking for a damn transfer. And I thought to myself, just do my job, hey? Okay, if the cashier needs an override, sorry, but I'm not a manager, nor am I a supervisor. I can't do that. Let me go grab someone who can. If you need change, sorry, same thing. I can't do that. Let me grab someone who can. If you need something behind the customer service desk, sorry, but I'm not customer service. It actually got to the point that D-Bag noticed, and he even tried to write me up for no longer doing my job. I quickly shut that down when I start to recite what being a cashier entails and what my actual job of being a cashier is. I told him if he wants me to continue with all of these responsibilities, that he needs to promote me so I can do all of those responsibilities. He quickly stepped back into being his passive-aggressive self. I eventually found another job with better pay and better benefits, and I hand him my resignation of me leaving in 10 days. The guy actually tries to deny it, saying, "No, you have to give us 2 weeks notice." I shut that down with a response, and I said, "You wouldn't be giving us 2 weeks notice if you're gonna fire us or lay us off. You would give us just a 2-minute warning." After quitting, I got the email address of the district manager from my friend, and then I went back to the store as a customer. I kept in touch with a couple of my old coworkers, and I kept asking them how they were doing and how's work going. None of them had a problem in venting to me on how bad things were getting with this D-Bag. I asked if they would be willing to make a complaint about him. I whip out my phone and quickly record the notes in my phone, the date and the register the cashier was on at the time. I then send that email with the attached notes and with the entire account on my part as well to the district manager. Now, this wouldn't be ProRevenge if I just stopped there. I took it one step further. You see, with all the receipts we get, there's a survey on the bottom of every receipt. And management kept trying to boost us to get customers to take the survey, because it helped with the storefront and all the points that the store gets. Well, here's the thing about that survey. When you fill out the survey, including the comments, everyone gets to see it, and I mean everyone. The D-Bag sees it, the assistant store manager, the regional manager, the district manager, the representative of corporate, they all get to see it. so you can imagine what I did. If I needed a snack for school, I filled out the survey. If I needed groceries, I filled out that survey. If I needed a drink, I filled out the survey. I must have gone to that store multiple times, and I gotten so many different surveys because there wasn't a limit for how many you can fill out. And each time, I made sure to put everything that D-Bag was doing on all of those surveys, including how he treats his employees. 3 months after I left, the person they hired back in seafood to make sure I couldn't go back there quit. And 6 months after I left, the D-Bag was nowhere to be found. A new manager did take over for him, and no one seems to know what happened to that guy. So I worked for a fast food chicken chain in Australia. There's 2 major ones, so that should be ambiguous enough. I worked there for over 3 years without issues, but then the franchise owner decides that he was going to retire, which is fair enough. Some of the higher-ups start to negotiate to take over 1 or 2 of the stores for their own business, which is also fair enough. Now's where the problem starts. There's way too many managers left and not enough stores to work in. As a salaried employee, we get paid regardless of how much we work. So obviously, this was causing the retiring owner some concern. Cue the area manager. They say to us, "I want you to continue using such and such. I know the date on the package says it's expired, but in my estimate, it should be fine for 2 more days." He says this in front of staff and my store manager. I ask him about it. Is he sure, knowing full well that this is not only illegal, but against the licensing laws of operation for a fast food place? I got shut down quickly, and I was told, use it anyways. The next day, the store manager hands me a write-up for using expired stock. I point out that he was there, and as my superior, it's his responsibility to take up the issue with the area manager. Since he didn't, I'm not accepting this written warning, and I won't be signing it. The next thing I know, I'm getting a second warning about this for insubordination. Right at this point, I'm sure that they're just looking for any excuse to dismiss anyone, to reduce staff, and to sell off. That said, we had a PDA with daily checklists on it. This requires 4 daily checks of stock use-by dates to be run through by specific times to ensure product quality every single day. And I started taking these super seriously. I would forward any out-of-date stock to superiors, including who had not completed them correctly previously, and included pictures of the stock. Both the store manager and the area manager, plus the HR officer and the owner was CC'd. I was then made to attend a meeting with the company lawyer, stating that my conduct was unprofessional and I was suspended with pay while an investigation takes place. And I want to add that all of this was super illegal, but the suspension with pay will be important. 2 days later, I get a call saying that I've had my employment terminated immediately, and I will not be receiving holiday pay or sick pay that I'm owed. Cue the drama. Since all of this was super illegal, as was the firing, I filed for a legal termination. This is a complicated process, which fortunately I had well documented, but disputes have to be filed within 28 days. Due to the complexity of the forms and having to drag information out of the company about specific incidents, the forms were filed 26 days after by express post, so it would arrive 1 day inside the time frame. Here are some points to speed this up. Number 1. They dispute the case being brought in at all since I was terminated on such and such date. Therefore, I'm out of the 28 days. They use the date of the suspension with pay as the termination date. Number 2. This was disputed 4 weeks in back and forth emails with appeals at every stage to slow me down before they caved. Number 3. They offered me the pay I was owed at this stage to shut me up and get me gone. I refused, knowing that they had no case for dismissal now and they'd pissed me off, and I went full out. I wanted pay for the time I missed and the job reinstated. This takes another 6 weeks. And number 4. I got the job back with pay for the time I spent fighting with them, and I had heaps of holidays owing, so I immediately took holiday pay, and I got another job before the pay ran out. This whole crap show got shut down 2 months after I left. It turns out that someone had informed the Food Safety Board, and crap hit the fan. Who knew? Gee, I wonder who made that report. That said, guys, this isn't just pro-revenge. Like, this is an example of how all workers should behave. Like, people need to start calling out managers and crappy companies on their crappy behavior. Hopefully they learned a lesson in all of this, and maybe in the future, these people will think twice before acting like complete a-holes to others. About 20 years ago, I was a sales engineer, supporting sales reps at this place that we'll call D-Bag Tech Company. That's when a new sales manager joins the team. He was a former coworker from a prior job, a petty little man. Before, we were peers. Now he was a manager over the sales reps I supported. I had a separate chain of command. He wasn't my manager, but the guy felt he should be. He was resentful of the power that sales engineers in this new company had. In an attempt to show me up, he closed a very large deal with a banking company. And he did so without any involvement from the sales engineers, just one sales rep. He gloats about it publicly, and he talks about how we don't even need sales engineers, the whole 9 yards. Later, the manager calls me in a panic, and we talk with the customer. The sales rep and the sales manager totally F things up. They sold the customer an incompatible set of solutions. I say that the customer could exchange one bit of stuff for another bit of stuff and everything would work. And they're roughly the same price, so nobody would lose any money. But the sales manager doesn't want to do it because admitting he messed up would make him look really bad. The guy then yells at me for bringing up price because that's supposed to be the sales rep job. He calls my boss and the guy craps all over me. My boss took his side and he craps all over me too, so I'm like, F you, I quit. I sent a very lengthy, detailed letter to HR explaining how the sales rep messed up, he lied to the customer, and how the sales manager and my boss tried to make me the scapegoat instead of trying to fix it, which would have been really easy and would have made everyone happy. I move on. I get a new job and I do other things. At some point, I'm chatting with an old friend from that company, and he mentions they messed up a huge deal that they spent a year on. I'm still bitter about this D-bag sales manager and my a-hole boss, so I post about it on a forum that a bunch of investors use. The stock crashed $13 the next day, and this will be important later. I find out that the banking company is suing my old company for effing up the deal that the D-bag sales rep manager messed up and tried to pin on me. I reach out to the banking company and I send them a copy of the letter I sent to HR, in which I detailed precisely how badly my old company effed them over. I talk with one of their lawyers and he's very happy, especially the part in my letter where I describe how the sales rep lied to the banking company. My old company subpoenas me for a deposition. I have to tell my old company's lawyers everything I told the banking company's lawyers. Just a bunch of lawyer stuff. The day before the deposition, my old company sues me directly. And do you remember their stock crashing? Well, they're suing me for bad-mouthing the company and attempting to short their stock, which I wasn't. However, there was a twist. Because my old company's suing me directly, I don't have to say anything to them at the deposition. Their preparation for the lawsuit goes completely out the window. They know they're effed because they read the letter I sent to HR, but they don't know how effed because they don't know what else I know or what I've told the banking's lawyers. Additionally, because they never deposed me, they can't catch me contradicting myself between what I say at the deposition and at the trial. They're dumbfounded. No idea how they could have effed up this badly. Turns out there were two legal teams, one defending against banking company's lawsuit, and another trying to scare people away from talking crap about the company on the internet by indiscriminately suing their critics. They don't communicate with each other, and the one team didn't mention to the other team that they would be suing a key witness in their case. In the end, my old company settles the lawsuit with the banking company, and they drop the lawsuit against me. And they fire the sales rep, the sales manager, and his manager too. What a fallout that was, guys, and this is a prime example of lacking common sense and toxic management at work. Like, I am seriously still baffled at how they could have easily fixed the mistake. But no, the sales manager was way too proud to admit his mistake, and what a costly mistake that was, right? And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/ProRevenge. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/I don't work here lady, where Karens are mistaking regular Joe Schmoes as employees, and they're getting super embarrassed. Go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.